In this section, we will cover the vCloud Air Gateway Service Network Address Translation NAT. I'm sure most of you would be familiar with this. You can translate an outside public IP address into an internal private address so that you're able to access internal services. So this is a virtualization of a network function. So there's no hardware involved in it. This capability is actually provided by the Edge Gateway software networking device that's available to you in VMware vCloud Air. So what we are going to do is to switch over to vCloud Air and take a look at the NAT capabilities that the gateway provides us. And here we are in vCloud Air. We are looking at the INE Virtual Data Center 2 and looking at the gateways that are available there. So by default you get one gateway. As we've seen before, our gateway IP is 144.243.185. That's the outside public address that, using network address translation, we want to translate to an inside private address on one of our networks. We have two networks attached to this gateway on the inside, and by clicking on networks, it'll load for me the two networks that we have in place at this point in time. As you know, we can always add a new network. We saw that earlier in one of the sessions in this course. So you can see the gateway is the same for both these networks. In this case, in the INE network, the internal addresses are in the 172.20/16 network, and out here are in the 192.168.109/24 network, and that's the default IP range that is provided when vCloud Air spins up a virtual data center for you. You can always add more afterwards, which is exactly what I did. So initially, when the VDC was created for me, it gave me the default routed network, and I could always have changed this as well, but I decided to add a new network just to show you that it can be done. Now, obviously, you can manage it in vCloud Director, but we will first take a look at looking at the interface in vCloud Air to see how we can look at the various services. So we go back to the gateways. So we've just learned that this gateway has two networks attached to it with public IPs of 192.168.109 network /24 network and 172.20/16 network. So by bringing the cursor here and clicking on this big icon, I click, and what it does is it takes me into the various services that are available on this gateway. We saw earlier that it's a compact configuration and high availability is disabled, so there is no hot backup available for this. Anyway, we are focusing on the NAT rules. As you all know, network address translation modifies the source destination IP addresses arriving or leaving from this edge gateway. So you can see SNAT stands for source NAT, DNAT stands for destination NAT, all very conventional in terms of networking. We know that the outside address is 144.2.43.185. So here's a destination NAT address, which basically says that if the original address coming into a destination to our gateway public IP is this on any port, then just translate it to this internal private address, which is on the default network. As you know, it has the 109 section in there in the IP, and again, any port, any protocol. So when a packet comes in to 144.2.43.185, this rule translates it into 192.168.109.2, and you obviously need to be able to send data back from 192.168.109.2, which is one of our virtual machines. And now, of course, what we need to do is we have to look at our source NAT, and any packet going out from this source out to the internet has to get changed to a public address, and that's translated to 144.2.43 and 185, so that we have connectivity both ways. So that's basically the way it works. You can, of course, select various rules that we have up here and enable or disable them. You can look at the actions as well. You can edit the rules. basically this is the way it works. And again, if you need to translate that any of these or change any of these, you can actually do that. We are not going to do that because that provides us access to some of the virtual machines that we have. In order to add a new either a source or a destination NAT, that's the way this works. A source NAT, you can have an original internal source, as an example 172.20.100.2, and I could translate that to one of the 3 public IP addresses I have on that gateway. So I could say I'm translating it to the 240, and I'm not going to enable this rule at this point in time. I'm just looking to show this to you, and I can select that, and I am going to finish it. Okay, now you must have seen something happen here. If not, let me just go back and add another rule. Let's go back, add another rule. Again, source NAT, let's look at 172.20.100.2. I'm going to translate that to 240, even if I leave that on at this point in time. And as you can see, you always get any port to any port, right? Now, in this interface, it looks like we don't have the ability to change the ports. So let's see if we can look at something else. I'm going to remove this because you can add multiple rules, and then I go back there. Okay, so you can see this one that we added just now is actually disabled. I'm going to keep everything clean, and we are going to delete that rule, and so the rule will go away. Now I would like to go back and manage this gateway using vCloud Director. So I click on Gateway, and instead of clicking on this icon here, the big rectangle here, I say I'm going to manage in vCloud Director, and let's see what we are able to do here. So we are downloading the new flash cookies. I understand that. Okay, here we go. So a new tab opens up, and here we are. We have the now familiar to us vCloud Director interface. I click on select the gateway, and I go to the actions, and I look at Edge Gateway Services. We've seen this a few times now, and we let this thing go. And these are obviously the services as we've seen before that are available on this gateway. Look at NAT, right? And now you can see the same rules in a slightly different format. So let's try adding an source NAT rule at this point in time, and we add one original range. Internal would be 172.20.100.2, and we're going to translate that to this other address that I have, which is 144.2, 144.2.43.240. This is one of the 3 public IP addresses I have. Just to be safe, I'm not going to enable it right now, and we're going to say OK. And that's where this goes again. Now, interestingly enough, we can do that and select it again. Okay, now you can look at enabling this in this way, right? And you can obviously delete this here as well. So when we go to the firewall, so this basically takes any port and translates any protocol to any. That's the way this thing actually functions. So there's no granularity here that you're able to apply. Also, it looks like here you cannot really do port address translation as well. The options don't show up in this interface that has been provided to us. Of course, the actual Edge Gateway, the full-fledged, full-blown Edge Gateway by a vCloud Director administrator has all those capabilities. And of course, if the gateway is being provided by NSX, the VMware Network Virtualization program, then obviously that is available as well, the port address translation. So which means you can have one external IP address and just pick up ports, so it's not a one-to-one. Okay, and that's really what we are looking at here. We can, as we've seen, create NAT rules here in the vCloud director interface, and I'm going to close this, and if we go back to the vCloud Air interface, which logged me off, we are able to do it there as well.